conversational debt the same way you care about financial debt, right? If you don't pay your mortgage, credit card, whatever, interests start to accrue and then they pile up and then it goes out of control. We minimize the damage that a small conflict can create on a team. And so we say it's going to fix by itself, it's going to go away until then it becomes a bigger issue. Most crises start small. We dismiss them and then boom, they explode.
Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Gustavo Razzetti joining us. Gustavo is the best-selling author of Remote Not Distant, Stretch for Change, and his new book is called Forward Talk, which came out about a month ago. Gustavo is a culture strategist, workshop facilitator, and keynote speaker with over 25 years of experience, first as a marketing and ad executive, and now as CEO of Fearless Culture, a culture design consultancy. Welcome to the show, Gus.
Hi, Andrew. Glad to be here. Thank you for hosting me.
Yeah, no worries. Let's jump in. Please give our listeners the elevator pitch version of your story.
Sure. Let's get started. I'm a recovered advertising person, so I work over 2 years in different agencies, and I'm still trying to get rid of all those bad habits. But I think that what drives my work, it's my boredom, right? I get bored pretty quickly, so I always need to find something that challenges me. And one thing I realized working in a creative industry is that even though we were paid to come up with new ideas, with new solutions, is that most organizations have much more ideas and talent that they think they have. Basically, what they lack is a culture, a fruitful culture that makes those ideas see the light of day. And I say, well, maybe instead of trying to sell ideas, why don't I work at a deeper level and help those companies get their things together?
Excellent. That's a great flip of the switch there. Gus, if you had to pick one event in your life that just put rocket boosters under your career, what would that be?
Yeah, I was a young strategist working in an agency, and we have a client that was difficult, like many clients are, at least from our perspective, of course.
What? Clients
And
difficult?
we have an issue, and then the client, I didn't know, and one of my colleagues either, they called the CEO of the agency to complain about ourselves, about our work and whatever. And the CEO, instead of, like many people do, giving the client the reason and then boom, slapping us on our face, he said, you know what, I trust my team. That sounds weird. Before jumping into what are next steps or conclusions, let me talk to them. And then he came back very calmly and he debriefed, and then he realized, it was a client misunderstanding. So when leaders stand up, not just to defend, because that wasn't the point, but to understand what's really happening instead of taking sides, whether it's the client, which we usually do, or your own people, that for me was game changing. And I took that lesson to everything I do when I was an employee, then a CEO, and now as a consultant.
Yeah, so I'm hearing active listening really was that key driver, and it was that skill that your boss used to get to the bottom of a challenging situation. Thanks for sharing that, Gustavo. It's rare to have the opportunity to speak with someone like you with such a purposeful arc of work to explore. All of your books really tell a story. So today I want to start with your books on change management, and there's a method for the madness, because change management, resilience, and then ultimately being able to screw up the courage to say what needs to be said, they're all interrelated. So many business objectives rely on effectively navigating change, but we don't spend the time building those muscles. You have a book called Stretch for Change, and I like the title because it gives that connotation that these muscles that we're working. What's the main thesis of Stretch for Change, and how practically can our listeners build adaptability skills that they need?
Yeah. The key message is that we need to stretch beyond what we think it's possible, and that's how taking risks. And it's about, of course, embracing moving beyond, or stretch beyond the comfort zone. And that's one distinction. People see comfort and discomfort in binary terms, but there's a third part, which is the risky zone. And I think that sometimes we're encouraging people to change too much, and then they don't want, and that's risky. So my approach is, what are the minimum viable changes that we can start implementing with ourselves, with our teams, and then our broader organization to start building that momentum? And the other thing is, we focus too much on change, but not in what doesn't change. Like Jeff Bezos says, what's not going to change in 10 years? And he built his business into those foundational things that are going to stay the same. People are always going to look for low prices, high delivery, speed, and variety, right? No one's going to say, hey, I want to buy things that are more expensive. So when it comes to change, we need to work on that tension. Stick to what won't change so people don't lose their identity, they don't get defensive, and then start adding changes to stretch themselves throughout time.
Yeah, change really needs to be stepwise for people. And that title of that book, Stretch for Change versus Jump for Change. I think that's a great message for our listeners. Gustavo, I'm doing these mentorship moments. We've got 2 of them today. These are hypotheticals that I put you into. And right now, you've got a chief human resource officer of a mid-sized business sitting right in front of you, and they want to invest in improving the change capabilities of the entire organization, but they're kind of stuck on where to start. Where can they start for the most impact in building change muscles in their teams?
One of the most impactful things that you can do and to get started is thinking about the narrative. Most of the time, the narrative is built around an ideal, and that ideal feels like, for example, we need to become AI first, right? First of all, that feels like too far-fetched. In organizations that we have people that are using AI for many years, they're really very comfortable, and some people that are still scared, or they're scared they're going to lose their jobs. That AI first thing feels like, oh my God, we're too far from there. I don't know how to get started. So how can we create a narrative that's more focused, but also that's more specific per team? We talk about innovation. When it comes to becoming more innovative, the expectation for your legal or finance team or compliance are not going to be the same for your marketing or product team. So rather to having a blanket narrative that applies to everything, be more specific. Ground your narrative to each team's need, what they can start doing to contribute to that larger goal.
So that stretch for change mindset applies to the messaging as well. And instead of trying to jump to something new, and everybody's gonna they're all gonna put on their comfort blankets, those heavy comfort blankets of the status quo, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Well, let's get to your new book, Forward Talk, The Bold New Method for Getting Teams Unstuck. That was released early last month. What is conversational debt? I'm curious. And why should leaders care about conversational debt? And how do they identify areas of conversational debt in their business?
You should care as a leader or a team member about conversational debt the same way you care about financial debt, right? If you don't pay your mortgage, credit card, whatever, interests start to accrue, and then they pile up, and then it goes out of control. the conversations that your team is not having or the issues that they're avoiding, because sometimes we feel, oh, we're having a conversation, but we actually end in a meeting that ends in yet another meeting and another meeting. So decisions are never final. And conversation is not just because we don't want to talk about hard issues, it's because we minimize the damage that a small conflict can create on a team. And so we say it's going to fix by itself, it's going to go away, people are not going to care about it until then it becomes a bigger issue. Most crises start small. We dismiss them and then boom, they explode. To finish the answer, there are 3 areas in which conversational depth affects teams and organization. First, in alignment. Usually we think we are aligned, but actually we are just working around the illusion of alignment, so everyone executes in different directions. Second, belonging. When we play too nice to get along and we avoid the tough conversations. So we say, yes, we love the ideas, usually the safest ones and not the great ones. And lastly, it's about collaboration. As I said at the very beginning, the resolutions that basically never end into an agreement, or we agree, but actually we don't follow through.
Yeah. How does a leader really kind of put their finger on it, on the issue? How do they know that that teams are putting these heavy blankets of the comfort of the status quo on, and not really having deep conversations? Because the team leader will come out of the meeting and said, boy, we really had a tough conversation today, and we really got to the bottom of it. And then 2 months go by and the same issues are cropping up. How do you really put your finger on, how do you identify that conversational debt is piling up?
There are 3 ways. One is becoming better observing signs or signals in real time. Second, there's a set of questions that I include in my book that help leaders assess, so reflect on how the team is doing and understand what are the key, not just, oh, we have conversational depth, but what kind of depth is actually affecting our team. And lastly, we have an assessment, and I'm not selling here because it's a free assessment, so people can go online, they can complete it, and they're going to get a score overall, but also by each type of depth, whether it's alignment, belonging, or collaboration depth, with practical next steps. But going back to the first, the easiest way is becoming more observant about those signals, what happens in the room. If you ask people a question and people are looking at each other, well, they're filtering. If they're looking at yourself like the leader as, hey, give me permission, or while they're speaking, they're looking at the leader for, is this right or wrong? Well, those are signs that people are not really avoiding the issue. When people rush to an agreement and they're not really debating it, they're not seeing the different angles, what they're missing, that's another sign of conversational debt. The people care more about let's move on versus making the right call.
All very actionable. Thank you, Gus. We're going to take a really short commercial break, and we'll be right back to talk about culture and communication. Want to understand money, markets, and the economy to make better financial decisions? I'm Andy Temte. Join me every Saturday morning for Money Lessons with Andrew Temte on YouTube or your favorite podcast streaming service. And we're back with Gustavo Razzetti talking about change management, culture, and communication. Gustavo, there's a really cool graphic on the marketing page for your book, Forward Talk, that plots issue avoidance against either the look back or look forward orientation of the business. Take us inside the meaning of the diagram or this plot and define what the upper right-hand quadrant forward talk means.
Yeah. So I like 2x2 matrix as a former strategist, right? And we have 2 axes. One is whether the conversations are focusing into the future and moving the team forward or into the past. And the other axis is about Are we addressing the issue or are we dancing around it? So this gives us 4 conversational patterns. There are 3 that are not good. Avoidance, for example, when we don't have the conversations. Blame, when we get stuck into what happened, who's the culprit, versus trying to find resolution, so we get stuck in the past. And groupthink, when we agree too quickly or we don't really address the issue simply to move forward, but we're not actually moving forward, just kicking the can. Forward talk is about conversations that move the team forward while also addressing the real issue. They go deep into it. And it's basically the solution to the other 3 patterns.
So would a team identify that which quadrant they're in a constructive way? Because I can see if a team is sitting around saying, are we in the forward talk quadrant or are we in the blame quadrant? And all of a sudden blame takes over and 50 minutes goes by and nothing happens. How can they work together to define where they are in this diagram?
Yeah, perfect. That's a great comment, because we don't want the diagnosis becoming to worsening where people are, right? Doubling down into the issues. First of all, these are conversational patterns. So rather than say we are here, it all depends the types of conversations. Some conversations can be better than others. So that gives teams like, oh, we're not bad. No, some conversations might be great, others might be so-so, and others maybe suck. So it's important to see or use that lens to observe different types of conversations. Blame, once again, I have a lot of questions and stuff that I develop for people to reflect on that, is basically when we focus on the who. Instead of starting with what or why, we start asking who screwed up, which department. Oh, it's a version of which department was late or didn't provide information on time. So that's a critical kind of sign when we focus into the past instead of understanding the system, rather than who screwed up versus what went wrong. How can we prevent this from happening again? So instead of trying to learn, we get stuck into who to blame, so we can, the problem is going to disappear, which it won't. Avoidance is, you can observe when people are silent, when people don't contribute, or basically there are 2 or 3 voices out of 10 that are actually participating.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to give you mentorship moment number 2. You now have the CEO of a large business sitting in front of you who just wants his teams to get the work done, stop whining, and just get along. What's your message to this numbers-oriented CEO to help them see the importance of investing in organizational culture to promote engagement?
There's a saying that culture drives engagement, not the other way around, right? So the culture is like the foundation. So if you want your trees or your forest to grow high, you need to make sure that you tend to that. Leaders are focusing, oh, I want more fruit from my trees. But if the soil is dry, it lacks nutrients, and it's not there, it's never going to happen. So I think that results as a consequence. Putting pressure on people in terms of getting more sales are not going to make people sell more. Getting along, the more you put pressure into people to get along, the less they're going to try to work together. For me, it's CEOs need to be more of a facilitator of conversations and trying to overcome obstacles. Usually people are going to say, we cannot work together. Well, what needs to change so you guys can start trusting each other, or you can start working together? So try to reframe the objection. Go with the team and say, guys, you're not working alone. What's going on? What are the key issues? What do I need? What can I do? What do you need to do to start working together?
Thank you for that. Gus, what have we not talked about today that you want to make sure that our listeners take away from the conversation?
Yeah. In my research, one of the things that was really interesting is that when I asked people why other people avoid conversation, most people said that it was out of fear. But I when asked, why is it that you yourself avoid conversations in a team or company setting? And most people said, because nothing will change. So basically, it's what I call the pointlessness paradox, because if you don't contribute, things are going to get worse, right? So it's an accident waiting to happen. And this is a real realization. And I've been there than that, working with psychological safety, creating a safe environment. But I realized that connecting words with action, it's a better way to make people to participate, to contribute. If we run a employee survey like it happens in many companies, and then the results are not shared, there's no action taken, people are going to stop completing it, or actually they're going to say whatever just to get rid of it, but then nothing's going to change.
I have a lingering question from this conversation, and in your 2x2 matrix, getting up into that forward talk quadrant, there are a lot of people who sit on teams, and they want to look back in the past. They want to place blame. They want to get their pound of flesh and have what they consider to be accountability for those teams or those team members that have somehow wronged them. How do you get those folks past that and into that healthier quadrant? How do you get that movement?
It's not easy, right? So there's not like a magic advice that, I'm going to do that. But we need to start changing patterns. So bad conversations result from patterns. So we need to start developing new ones to replace the old patterns. One of those is I ask people, okay, what was your role in this screw up? And what can you do differently today? So I ask them to reflect on their own. Yeah, it was Gustavo's fault. Gustavo screwed up. Well, okay, Andrew, I hear you, but what about you? And maybe Andrew didn't call Gustavo on time, or maybe when he saw that Gustavo was totally lacking prioritization, or was totally out of control, whatever, or he was running late to a project, Andrew could have raised his hand, or maybe have said something, or whatever, right? So everyone somehow, even at a small scale, has contributed to that issue to happen, not just the person that we're blaming. So when people start reflecting about what was your role and what you can do moving forward, then it changes the conversation.
So you're using the adage of, if I point a finger at somebody else, there's three more pointing back at me. So how about we start there?
Totally. Yes. You said it best.
Very, very good. Gustavo, let's have a little fun to close out the show, shall we?
Sure.
All right. I've got three lightning round questions for you. The first is, Gustavo Razzetti, you've just won $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
I'm thinking about the Ocean Conservancy, or anything that has to do with ocean. I like to scuba dive, and I would give like 70% or even 80% or more of that money to them.
Excellent. Excellent. Gus, I give you access to a really small time machine, and you can send a message to an earlier version of yourself. What's the message, and what previous version of yourself do you send it?
I would be applying some of the principles of forward talk when I was a CEO myself, and I get blaming people or get frustrated, and maybe look myself into the mirror more and say, well, what's my part on it and what can I change?
Gus, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Yeah, I'm in two things. First, getting healthier, so trying to do more workout, eating better, taking care of myself, sleeping better as well. And from a professional standpoint, I'm also reinventing, because of this new book. It's also a new framework. So I'm trying to kill, without necessarily killing, but some of my previous work, to make room for the new. Instead of adding and adding, it's okay, what do I need to stop doing so I focus on this new line of work and this new approach.
The old start, stop, continue. Awesome. It's
Mm-hmm.
Teams. It's such a simple framework. Start, stop, continue, and so many teams don't make the time to just go through very simple exercise like that, because it just the projects just keep piling on, and we don't look back and say, well, what are we doing that we should not be doing? So thank you for that.
Exactly.
Gustavo, where can folks find you?
You can go to my website, GustavoRazzetti.com, or you can look on LinkedIn. And the last time I checked, it was the only Gustavo Razzetti with double Z, double T. And of course, if you're interested in my books, you can look into Amazon and check my books there as well.
Very good. Thank you so much for your contributions today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the conversation.
Okay. My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find the show on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and maybe a neighbor. The show is produced by Nick Temte, and we'll see you next time on The Balancing Act.